Hi, he's Mattyman.
And he's Vannyboy. And you're listening to The Rusty Playground, a Gen X-centric podcast about all things Gen X, which is the coolest generation.
The coolest generation. In this episode, we're going to talk about something near and dear to our hearts. Because you wanted the best, you got the best. The hottest band in the world, Kiss!
Kiss! Kiss tonight!
Yes, tonight on every shelf in the world, somebody's got to kiss something.
Yes, precise. I was just thinking about the voiceover in Kiss Meets the Phantom.
Yeah, we'll get to that for
Yes.
sure. Oh, that's a must have in any podcast about Kiss. So,
Yeah.
So for the uninitiated, which I'm sure is absolutely none of you, there's no way that you've lived in the United States of America and you're older than 15 years old that you don't know who Kiss is. It's impossible. I often say, I've noticed when I listen to these shows back that I'll say, oh, very famously, or, that kind of thing. But this is true. If you don't know who Kiss is, you literally have been living under a rock, because they're ubiquitous. They're iconic. They've been in cartoons. They've been in, Scooby-Doo. They had their own movie, which now that everybody likes to watch bad movies and stuff, many people have seen it. Then they've had, lunchboxes. They've sold their image on everything.
Pinball machines, surfboards, train sets. I could say anything because I'm confident that there is a Kiss marketed version of whatever it is I say.
Yes, there is, and we'll get into more of those as we hit that
pacemakers.
Pacemaker, probably at this point, a lot of their fans need them. Hey, can I have one of those famous Kiss ones? So yes, they are
colostomy bags.
This one's filled up with Peter Criss.
There's a little blood mixed into it.
So Kiss, very iconic band. They were very trend-setting at the time.
Denture dams. They also have denture dams. I'm pretty sure. Oh, sorry.
They have to at this point.
Yes. Continue with whatever
breast implants, you name it. But Kiss they were a very good band. Okay, I'll put it that way. They weren't Van Halen, for example. They weren't. Their musicianship wasn't Living Colour or something like that. They weren't like.
There's no one in that band that's going to even hint at virtuosity.
No,
not that they would even care about that.
Yeah, no, they were just out to be the next Beatles, and they didn't really care about being, again, Eddie Van Halen or jazz level musicians or something.
I don't know if Beatles is the exact analogy, but I would say they're more like, we want to be the Rolling Stones, in that they had a swagger and they had a stage presence, whereas the Beatles, outside of their initial charm, playing over here, they didn't really have much of a visual thing happening.
No, they didn't have. It wasn't when Paul Stanley was watching an interview and he was talking about, they wanted to view themselves as like an American Beatles, because they wanted, when you saw their songs, that they'd be written by Kiss. They didn't want to be separated by. They wanted the illusion that everybody was just as talented as everybody else in the band, and not that almost 80%, 90% of the songs were written by Paul Stanley or Gene Simmons, or mainly Paul Stanley. So that's what, in the interview I saw, Paul was referring to. He literally said, we wanted to be like the Beatles in that sense, but they were just a rock and roll band. They didn't have any interest in anything other than just hard rock.
Well, you got songs that you would just instantly recognizable and classic, and you don't have to worry about, like, you have to be Steve Vai to play this.
Right. And they started out in, I think it was 1973. In 72, Gene Simmons and Paul Stanley, two of the founding members, were in a band called, do you know the name of the band?
Wicked Lester.
Yeah, Wicked Lester. That's right. Which was one of the inspirations for Twisted Sister. They were they liked how that flowed, so that's why they called themselves that. But anyway, and they were in New York, and it was a real just a hodgepodge of everything going on. And at where they were, they had a band, the New York Dolls, which I know Maddie's familiar with. They were, I think the Dolls were kind of one of those bands that like 200 people saw, but 500 bands wanted to be, kind of thing.
That is, very true, because of just the notoriety, what they kind of embraced, what they stood for, the energy.
So New York Dolls were, they basically wore women's clothes and wore makeup, crazy.
It was glam. It was the glam era, and that was the American equivalent.
Yes. Good way to put it. And so the music was okay for them, but it was their image. And Gene Simmons and Paul Stanley wanted to kind of emulate that. So they went out and got a drummer by the name of Peter Criss. And then later, not a whole lot later, hooked up with guitarist Ace Frehley. And they were kind of, let's become the next New York Dolls. But the more they thought of it, they're like, we don't, saw in an interview, Gene Simmons was talking. He's like, we'd come out wearing women's clothing and stuff, but they were all kind of big. Gene's 6'2", 215 pounds at the time. And he's like, he looks like a linebacker in your sister's clothes. So he was like, it's kind of silly. So they just happened to go one night to see Alice Cooper. And they saw how people were reacting. They saw how he looked. Of course, they knew how he looked, but they wanted to see how he did it. So they got up close and they said they had a epiphany. Said, hey, why don't we create a band where we're all our own Alice Cooper and we create our characters and we just live through that. And, we'll still have the music. The music will speak for itself, but, people will be drawn in by this. It was, a brilliant stroke, really, to be honest.
The thing was, I remember even in my teens thinking, without an Alice Cooper, there probably wouldn't have been a Kiss.
Right.
At least
there would not.
Not that what as far as what we would have known anyway.
Yeah, they probably would have been a band. Obviously, they were a band, but they, that seeing Alice Cooper and what he did and his theatrics just lit a light bulb for these guys, and so they just talked to each other and said, "Hey, let's just dig something in ourselves and make that our characters, and we'll do it that way." So Gene wanted to be the demon because he's kind of a sexual demon, famously. We'll get to that as well. And Paul was Star Child, and he kind of wanted to be androgynous, sort of. He said he wanted to be, I think he said part Bowie, part, I can't remember all the parts he wanted to be, but basically all love would flow through him, kind of thing. And then Ace, he was always interested in astronomy and space and all that, so he came up with Space Ace. And then Peter Criss had kind of the lamest one. Well, there'll be times, I'm sure, when it sounds like I'm bashing Peter Criss, and I don't mean to, but the reality is that he and Ace developed some really bad habits, and Ace was a very good guitarist, and Peter was just kind of middle of the road. He was probably the lesser of the musicians, I felt, but he definitely had a big head on him. So, but he, instead of what is inside me that I can bring out for my character, he said he had this big black cat that he liked, and he's like, oh, maybe I'll just be a cat. So that's,
even as for me, who I'm a crazy cat guy, we got 8 cats. Love cats,
right?
If you're a cat person, you could ever get tired of talking about cats. But God, Jesus, like what it really is like that's just the lamest of all of them. Even with their powers,
it reminds me of our buddy Ken, who when we're playing a Marvel comics role-playing game, and you can literally be anything you can possibly imagine. And he wants to be a police officer with a gun that never runs out of bullets, and
a jetpack. Don't forget the jetpack.
You're like, but like that could actually happen. Why are you wasting your time with this? But yeah, that's kind of how Peter Criss was. He was just lazy about it. He didn't have the imagination of the others.
Right.
And I think that plays.
But we're not trying to bash you, Peter. Come on.
No, actually, I worked with a guy who loves Peter Criss, and he's met him like 4 or 5 times at these different things where you can pay to have a picture, meet him and stuff. And he said he's just a really sweet guy, and he probably is. But when he's in his late 20s, and he's in New York, and he's cocky as shit.
Mm-hmm.
And, as Kiss gets bigger and bigger, of course, all of their egos got bigger and bigger. And then when he had, their biggest hit ever, and he's really the lesser musician of all of them. He doesn't know how to read music. He doesn't know how to really write. And he's kind of tone deaf.
Well, there's, the idea that you're making more money when you've got songwriting credits.
Yeah.
And that's when we can get also to the contentious aspect of, did he really write Beth?
Yeah, the answer is no. And
once again, we're not bashing Peter.
We're not. Yeah,
really, it's a good impression of us doing that.
Yes, I wish you all the luck, Peter. I've had you've brought a lot of joy to my life. It's nothing personal, but these were just things
you made me want to play drums, and in the same option, not very well.
Come on, you're better than Peter Criss, man. Come on.
I don't know. You hear some of that stuff, you're like, all right, that's amazing. What he did in the early years.
Yeah.
I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. Yeah. Because, I think as time went on, there, drugs and alcohol and all that stuff got to him. But so anyway, to keep on track, basically, they all came up with their own characters. We've all seen them. They're very iconic. And they had a lot of it. They were like every night, no matter where we are. And at first they were just playing in absolute total dives in New York. I mean, like New York dives.
Yeah.
Sketchy places.
Like, how bad Times Square was? It's worse than that.
Yes. The pre-Giuliani Times Square, that was a heaven compared to the places that they were playing. But, they were trying to make it. And so they just said, I don't care if we're playing in front of one person or 300. Let's give them everything we got. And they did. And then they started using fireworks and stuff on stage, which, looking at it now from 2024, we're like, well, yeah, of course. Well, no, nobody else did that. Yes. They were the ones that set that trend.
Like, if you look at a stage show from that time period, it's pretty tame compared to what you have now.
Oh yeah,
compared to what they did in recent years.
Right. I mean, if you look at some of the wildest, traditionally viewed amazing live bands, The Who, Black Sabbath, Stones, any of those around that time period, they didn't have fireworks, explosions. They didn't have all the lights and stuff. You can go and watch, when Black Sabbath's performing in Paris, I think it was Paris, it's France anyway. And, it's literally 4 guys up on the freaking stage.
Well, that was in 1970. That was before they were playing at larger venues.
Right, but I mean, they didn't.
But there was no stage show whatsoever.
Yeah, it was just put these guys up here, and we got to break their shit down real quick when it's done.
I want to say one thing though.
Yeah.
Are you talking about how Kiss was one of the first bands to really push a stage show?
Mm-hmm.
And we talked earlier about how Alice Cooper influenced them as far as all doing a character.
Yeah, very, very trend-setting guy.
Yeah. Another thing they took from him was on that last tour, a big tour for their $1 Billion Babies album in '73.
Mm-hmm.
Elaborate stage show. Take a look at photos or video footage or anything. And of course, unfortunately, YouTube won't do it justice. But if you could see a good quality clip, you'll be like, wow, this was a huge stage. Elaborate setup. They had like tiers when no one else was doing a thing like that.
Kiss or Cooper?
Cooper.
Yeah, I know. I remember seeing things on like Midnight Special and stuff, which was still the early 70s, but I mean the early 70s, like 74, 75, 76 probably. My brother would watch it, and you'd see Alice Cooper, and he's got the guillotines, and it was a play. Really, it was a play that he was doing. And
he did a Welcome to My Nightmare special musical on TV.
Yeah, I remember seeing that. That was wild.
Yeah, but that's that particular tour that I mentioned, $1 Billion Baby 73. That was the one where they had the money by then to really do a large stage presentation, and so it was like kind of like first time anyone even tried. But then Kiss said, "Hey, we'll do that times 10."
Yeah.
So,
and it was smart. They pulled it off. They eventually their stage show and stuff got to where it cost millions of dollars extra. But when they first started out, it was not big compared to what it is now, but compared to what their contemporaries were doing, it was really blowing people's mind. So Kiss went. Go ahead.
I was going to say, like, if you went to a Floyd show, you'd get an elaborate lighting per se, but nothing to speak of from the band. They just stand there.
Right.
So
Kiss was not that way. Right.
So they were thinking, rather than you looking at a screen of stuff, behind us, you'll be looking at us. So the energy level, of one of their shows, I think was, they really brought that up. Several notches.
Yeah, they were, and what Paul Stanley was saying in his book was that their mentality was all of us performing every second, all the time, even if they didn't feel like being there, so it wasn't like, like Van Halen, for example, a band that is, world renowned for being like one of the greatest live acts of all time. But you had Roth or you had Hagar, and they were really going all over the place, doing all the kind of stuff. And, Roth was doing his backflips and his karate kicks and everything. And, Eddie and them would, they had their spots where they would, kind of run across the stage or whatever. Michael Anthony, that kind of thing, or solos. But it wasn't like Kiss. Kiss was, each moment that they were there, it was, let's give it our 100% best, which was, a lot higher energy than what most people were used to. And then they come out wearing this makeup. And so that in itself was like an attention grabber, right?
Right. And they're all wearing these platform boots, so they're towering over anyone standing next to them.
Yeah. I always loved, in the song, Do You Love Me? And it says, you really like my limousine. You like the way the wheels roll. You like my 7-inch leather heels. You have a little pause there, and which leads me to their music. They were playing live everywhere, and trying to build it up. So they got a guy, a manager, I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but he told them he'd never managed a rock band before, but if he couldn't land them a deal within a couple months, then they'll just split ways, and they won't owe him any money or anything. And the guy somehow got in touch with somebody who had just left like Columbia Records or something. He was a big exec, and he went and started his own record company called Casablanca. And that guy was looking for acts. Just timing worked out perfectly. And the guy went to see him in basically a place that was, prostitutes and all this other stuff. And he said, the manager said that they literally had to jump over where the steps were broken. There's like 3 steps broken. So they had to grab the poles, pull themselves, so it was like, bottom barrel. And, but they went there and was just, holy crap. There's nothing like these guys. They are really out there. Their performance is out there. Their music is that they like the music, so it wasn't just a one-trick pony. And so they signed them to a deal, and they made the first 3 albums, and they didn't sell very well at all. And they would tour, and they'd be playing packed places. the biggest problem with touring for them starting out was that nobody wanted them to open for them because they had all this pyro and they had, you know, the stage presence and high energy. And if, you know, nobody wants to follow that if they're just, you know, long in the tooth at this point, which was like, say, when they opened up for Black Sabbath, and Gene Simmons was on the same side of the stage as Geezer Butler was going to be on. And he walks off and Geezer's standing there. And when he sees him, he's still in character with Geezer. And he's like, and Geezer turned around and ran. And Ozzy told him later, he said, you know, I knew our band was not going to last much longer when they were scared by the opening band's bassist, you know, so.
Yeah.
And ironically, Ozzy's, I've read this quote from him multiple times. He knew that Black Sabbath was dead when he saw Van Halen open them up for him. He's like, man, these guys, we can't keep up. You know, they were all hooked on drugs and they hated each other and everything at that point. And Van Halen was hungry. So it's two incredible bands that
well, the mindset was different back then, because I think a lot of guys, as they started getting into their 30s, they're already looking at like, man, it's over for me. You know, I'm done.
Right.
They already were getting, what's the word I'm looking for? They were getting disillusioned just by the idea that, oh, I'm not going to be as young as I was. And it's supposed to be a youthful market.
Yeah. And Paul Stanley, in the interview with Steve-O from Jackass, Steve-O asked him, he's like, so, you know, you guys have done this for so long. I mean, when you were starting out, could you have imagined that? And he's like, no, we couldn't have imagined it because it had never been done. Rock and roll was still so young, and that, you know, there was the bands from the 50s had basically all fizzled out at this point. I mean, you know, you still had Elvis at that point, but that's Elvis. That
was a big deal to be made of him having a comeback.
Right. The 68
the
comeback.
idea that who in their 40s is going to like make it back into rock and roll.
Yeah. And, you know, he quotes, Daltrey saying, you know, I want to die before I get old. You know, this was their mentality, was that, you know, I'll be rocking and rolling when I need to get rich, because this isn't going to last very long. And so the thought of, you know, still playing packed arenas like Kiss was until they did their final tour or whatever, that just ended this year, was just, they didn't even think about it. So it wasn't even like, no, I don't see us doing that. It's just nobody else had ever done that. So
right.
It never crossed their mind.
Yeah. There is no template, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And, yeah, so that makes total sense. But, so their albums, the first three albums didn't sell well, but they were selling out wherever they went. They were blowing everybody off the stage that they performed with. Paul Stanley said that, you know, here they just, you know, these record companies rip you off. They're ripping these guys off left and right, right? The main guy that ran Casablanca, he's getting...
Neil Bogart, by the way.
Neil Bogart. Oh, that's why I called it Casablanca.
Yes.
It makes total sense. Good. He said that, or say he would get his cut off of the net, right? So he's getting his 30% off of the $20 million. And then it goes after taxes. And then Kiss, the band, has to get their share and pay everybody after that. So, you know, they're going in the hole, making this guy millions and millions of dollars. And that's kind of been, you know, that's how the music industry was run for a very long time, especially the 70s. And, so
that's another reason why in the film industry, they have the creative accounting. So, you know, they have a very loosey-goosey idea of like what makes a profit. So let's just say you're one of the directors or writers who would say, hey, I want a %. And they say, sure, we'll give you a % of gross, not net, but gross. And then later they say, oh, we haven't made money on it yet. 30 years later.
Right.
So
Yeah,
never, always specify net, folks.
yes, because they're not in it to make you money. They're in it to make themselves money, and they were very good at it. I mean, you'd hear stories about, you'd see Peter Frampton, with on his 10th concert date where he's sold 120,000 tickets, and he's made $50,000. You're like, this doesn't make any sense. They're robbing him. But he went to his manager, so not the Casablanca guy. Went to the manager to ask him for $50. Paul Stanley did.
I think it was Bill Ocon.
Is that who it was?
Yeah, the manager.
Yeah, and he went to him and was like, he was going to ask him for money. And when he gets there, as he first starts talking to him, he looks down and sees that the guy has on his suit, he has a rip that's been stitched, and he couldn't do it. He's like, I can't ask. Actually, I think it was for $5, but he's like, I couldn't ask this guy whose pants he's sewing together, for money. I just didn't feel good about it. So he's like, oh, just checking on you, see how you were doing. So they weren't doing well. They were kind of on their last hope. And somebody, maybe it was that guy you just mentioned, their manager, said, you guys, you always hear, your music doesn't sound the same on the record as it does live, because of course you're amazing live. So why don't we just make a live album? And they did. They of course made Kiss Alive 1. It's called 1 now, I guess, but it was Kiss Alive. And it let everybody feel what it was like to be, get a sense of how much energy, and you'd hear the explosions and the crowd. And it was just probably the first like truly incredible live album that transcended just listening to something on the radio.
Right. And, yeah. That was kind of like that golden era of great live albums. Like a year later, Frampton Comes Alive.
Right.
Would be another great example.
Yeah. And they, the sky's the limit at that point. Cause I mean, I had it on 8-track. I'm sure I had a couple of the 8 tracks. My brother had the 8 tracks. And, when we went to Florida, when I was a kid, and we had, I've kind of told this story before in our previous ones, I guess, but basically we were going to Florida as a family. And so my parents rented a RV, a motorhome is what they were called then. And then it had an 8-track. So we were all excited. Yeah, it had 8-track. We can listen to music. And my grandfather said, I'll buy you music, but I don't want to listen to any of your, rock and roll hippie stuff. And so he called it something different. Yeah,
I think I remember you telling me. Yeah, yeah, pretty bad term.
Yeah, it was black music, but not black. He was just old time guy.
And so it makes no sense where that would come from. But
none. Me and my brother looking at each other like, this is black music to you, Kiss? I mean, what? It didn't make any sense to us, but I
mean, yeah, I guess I could actually maybe think of something that may have had him go in that road, and that is like Paul Stanley. His voice, he has kind of a soulful voice in a certain way,
right?
And they kind of in many places do kind of put in I won't say exactly Motown, but with the multiple vocals, makes you think of Motown.
Well, also, especially in those earlier albums, I noticed, because I was going back and listening to them for the first time in years, getting ready for this, and a lot of 5/7s is what they have. A lot of songs that are they're 5/7. So basically, what that means is like a Chuck Berry, dun 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 dun, that kind of thing. So they did have a lot of that in their music. And, it was rock and roll, and to a lot of those old timers born in the 20s.
They meant black.
Yeah. Drums meant black, so.
Right. That's a good point.
And, but we were delighted that he did follow through. He got us, Love Gun. He got us Kiss Alive. might have even gotten Kiss Alive 2 at that point. I can't remember, but I think so. And then some, some other bands, Kansas and stuff like that. But, it was just, I'll always remember that as, whenever I think of Kiss, I'm like, oh, there's this black music,
Yeah.
But so anyway, they just blew everything blew it all out of the water. And then from there, it was just this meteoric rise into superstardom, that they also were smart to use their image to start actually selling it on everything, like we were talking about earlier. And so, if you can think of it, pins, magazines, dolls, car hoods, anything, you'd see Kiss on it. They just became just
Brass
everywhere.
knuckles, people. CB
Yes.
radios.
My cousin Vincent, who I've mentioned before, love him. He I've also told this story previously, but I'm not. We had a first season, and this is the second season. I don't know if anybody else has heard it, but basically,
You need to binge this, people.
yeah, right. So he was in Kiss Army, which of course is their fan base, and they were the first ones to really know what they were doing with this marketing thing. I mean, to really, really know what they were doing. And they had Kiss Army. Vincent was a member, and they had a deal with Mallow cups, which are like, if you don't know what they are, they're basically like Reese's peanut butter cups
with marshmallow in it.
with marshmallow instead of peanut butter. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so you could send in a certain number. It was like,
Man, I want some of those now. Where am I
They
going
are
to get
good.
them? I got to go to friggin' Cracker Barrel.
Cracker Barrel. Oh yeah.
I got to go to the Cracker Barrel and go to that section where they got the old timey candy.
Oh yeah. Yeah. They actually, you can get that at the one down the street from where I'm at. I get them every now and then. I'm like, oh yeah, Mallow cups. So
We need to bring back the Marathon Bar, and then I'll leave it at that.
yeah, they were good. What was the one with that looked like a braid, like a woman's braid?
That
was Marathon.
One.
Yeah,
Yes.
Marathon. Yeah, that was good. Real
The
good.
fools. Anyway, so
Fools.
The fools.
So anyway, Vincent, he ended up having to send a
Delicious
saved up.
Mallow cups.
Yep, it was 150 of them, I believe, of the cards that came on the bottom of it that you could save up, and we'd eat Mallow.
My God. Your cousin was more Mallow cup than man.
I mean, it's crazy. And so we would all eat them, and we'd give him the bottoms of it. That was like the little tickets or whatever. And so he sent it in, and for being a member and doing that, sent it in with something like, $87 or something in like 1976. So it was expensive.
Yeah.
It was a jacket that was made with space age material, like you would see Space Ace wear. But it was man, I had the name in my.
Is it like this? Is that like that silver racing jacket the guy in the Hardee's commercials wore?
Yes, it's that. It's mylar type of. It's like a mylar on top of it, and so Vincent he waited, and it was almost like Ralphie in the Christmas Story. We'd go out and wait for, do I get my decoder ring kind of thing, and he finally got it. He brought it down to my Memo Ordries at Christmas, and he was so proud of this thing, and he got it and he put it on, and it went and like ripped from his armpit to his side. And we were crying, we were laughing so hard. And you could almost see the little black squiggly over top of his head where he was just about to burst into flames. That's what it sounded like.
How did he do it? He just slipped it on. He just put it on and he just flexed his arms or something.
He just put it on, and when he went to like pull the zipper closed, to do it. It just ripped. It was just like a cheap piece of shit. he done spent all that money and time. We all were giving him a mallow cup. Oh my god!
I'm pretty sure Gene back then was like, "Let me see if I can do my." This is for the fans. I have nothing whatsoever to do with this shoddy product.
Yeah. Oh, but I thought it was
for another $50. We'll make it 50, right.
Yes, but Gene, you said you had nothing to do with it. I thought it was cool to begin with. I had everything to do with it. Can you replace it for free? No, I don't like that thing, But
yeah.
But to their credit, he wrote a letter and sent it back, and they sent him a new one because it probably only cost $10 to make.
Yeah.
And but anyway, so I
landed back then probably like $2. Yes,
right. Yeah. And so it was nothing for them. And they probably sold 50,000 of them. I don't think I've ever seen anybody else have one, but he still has it, and he's kept it. He kept it in his closet. It looks great. It's in great condition, and
right now he should have it like it's in storage, like people do for like their wedding dresses. Good God, man!
I know at this point, right? They also, their imagery itself was so iconic and so recognizable instantly. It wouldn't even have to be all four of them, but they had, some really iconic album covers. Obviously Destroyer was super cool, and Rock and Roll Over, which was very unique looking. They were very sharp about this stuff, and I guess, in fairness, rock was getting, to be like 20, 25 years old at this point, rock and roll itself. So they were really got in a groove, and Kiss, Alice Cooper was the mega trendsetter, but these guys knew how to do it for mass audiences. And, it was pretty incredible. But once that happened, you started seeing them everywhere, every magazine, like we said, every, everything that you can think of, they had their images. If you look at those little pop dolls or whatever they're called, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Because you have like 100 of them. Well, you didn't have like Elvis ones and stuff, but they were Kiss ones at the time. You could find dolls, like soft dolls, like action figures, car. They had Kiss car, toy cars and stuff.
The 70s was a perfect time for them to be coming out with these personas, because that's when you had Mego was the company that made all those superhero action figures, 8-inch action figures.
Right.
And so they're the company that did a line for Kiss.
Were they the ones that passed on Star Wars?
Yes. Yes. That killed them.
Yeah, that was not a good call.
It was not. I mean, they're back at some capacity now because there's plenty of people like our age that grew up with them, and there's just been more interest in them. So I think they are back officially as a company. But long and short of it is, so many other companies like Kenner, Mattel, everyone was making toys, action figures. So why not?
Right. And it's not like they weren't like Pearl Jam. They weren't like Kansas or Boston or any regular band. Their image was so strong that it absolutely was tailor-made for that kind of thing. And they didn't think of that when they first started the band. They just thought it would be attention getting, but yeah, it translated over very well.
Yeah, it took a life of its own quickly, as they would say.
Yep. And so they just went, at the beginning of this, when we said you wanted the best, you got the best, the hottest band in the world, Kiss. That's from Kiss Alive. And when he said that, they were not the hottest band in the world, but it wasn't.
That was their confidence, though.
Yeah.
You had to, fake it till you make it.
Exactly. And after everybody heard that album, they just went, they just went in a different, a totally different level. And, you know, even to the point of now, they're so iconic. You know who they are, even if you don't. I mean, you've heard a Kiss song, you've heard Rock and Roll All Night, Party Every Day. You've heard, you know, some of the, you've definitely heard a Kiss song here or there. Hell, commercials. Gene Simmons in the 90s, right? He was the first one to do the Dr. Pepper commercial where it's like, trust me, I'm a doctor.
That's right.
Yeah.
I forgot all about that one. Holy shit.
Yeah. And so Kiss became ubiquitous within, you know, American culture, pop culture at least, and you could see them everywhere. Well, they kept making albums. Their albums got better as time went on, and then let me interject here with their logo since we've been talking about their merch. So they have this logo that I'm sure you've seen. If you haven't seen it, I don't know why, but just look it up on the internet.
And come on, everyone's seen it.
Yeah, you'd think. And but it has the two S's done like lightning bolts. But
unfortunately, it also has some itself.
Yes, it also is the same S's basically as the Nazis wore for the
SS,
the SS commanders, the like worst Nazis of the worst of the Nazis.
Yes,
so that's saying something. And it's even doubly ironic when you consider that Paul Stanley and Gene Simmons are Jews, and Gene Simmons
and
is actually,
also, if you know, like those are stage names, both of them.
Oh yeah, right, yeah. So Gene Simmons, for example, his real name is
Chaim Weiss.
Yeah, it's he was born Chaim Weiss. So Chaim.
Yes, thank you. That's better than what I just did.
Yeah.
Sorry, Gene.
WITZ. He also speaks like 5 languages or something too. And I think Paul Stanley, his let me see, his name was Stanley Burt Eisen. And there's a funny story, speaking of them being Jewish, where Gene Simmons was on the Mike Douglas show. Have you ever seen this?
I've seen this. This is I can't remember the other.
Toadie Fields was her name. She was
okay. I couldn't remember the name. I couldn't remember what celebrities were on, but I knew it was an older woman who said that she just knew he was a good little
nice Jewish boy.
Yes.
Yeah, he referred to himself as he's evil incarnate. You know, he's in his and that elicited some pretty uncomfortable reactions from the studio audience. And then Toadie Fields turned to him and said, "Well, wouldn't it be funny if beneath all of this makeup, you were just a nice Jewish boy?" And everybody laughed. And Gene said, "You should only know," which in the way that he says that should tell you right there he's Jewish, right?
Yeah.
If only you knew, that would be what most people would say. And she replied, "I do. You can't hide the hook." A reference to a Jewish nose. So that's quite funny. But anyway, so them having an SS on the end of their logo, which was totally, they just didn't even think about it. Paul Stanley didn't even think about it. And he even, when he made the logo, one of the S's is not exactly the same as the other S. And so when they went to make it, to put it on the album, they were like, "Hey, you want our artist to fix that up?" And he's like, "Nah, just leave it." And so that their logo and it's all caps. So that just led people to say,
is it an acronym?
An acronym for something, right? And so, famously, I'm sure you know what people said it was. One of them.
What I heard in whatever magazine I was reading back when in my youth, I think they said it was Kings in Satan's Service.
Right. Kings in Satan's Service, or Kids in Satan's Service, or Knights in Satan's Service
was another one I read.
Which is hilarious. But, anything they could do to, people hated rock and roll, right? So it was, they're evil. It's always been going on. I mean, when Elvis and Chuck Berry and all them were doing their thing, it was the same story.
And Little Richard,
taboo.
And
And, Jerry Lee Lewis, it was like, this is the devil's music, right? So even though, Elvis is singing, wise men say, you Satanist, but,
you sodomite,
yeah,
stone him,
kill him,
yeah.
Jehovah. But, so anyway,
a lot of things to unpack, kids.
Yes, that's all right. Go watch Monty Python. So the logo itself had those, two problems, and I say problems, but it also helped to push them, right? Because kids knew better. They knew they weren't Nazis. Nothing they said, they had nothing to do with it.
Nope.
And
just one of those unfortunate quinky dinks.
Yeah, he just didn't think about it. So, but it's close enough to it that in Germany and Austria and some of those countries, they modified.
They have to because it's actually banned.
Yeah, they can't. They don't have free speech, so you just you can't have the SS too too close to home for them, I guess.
Yeah. So how do they stylize it there?
It looks like two backwards Z's.
Okay.
Or Zeds for our British friends.
Or Canadian friends.
Or Canadians. I don't have any friends in Canada. Never mind. Just playing, people. Hi, Corey. Corey's my friend in Canada. Hi, Natalie.
Hey, if we liked any show, any sci-fi or fantasy programming, it was probably shot in Vancouver back in the day. In the 90s.
Yes, 100%. Yeah. But so they had to change it for that reason. But it was, it's very iconic. It's as iconic as any rock band logo could possibly be. They just got to where they were you couldn't escape them. In 1976, they released Destroyer, which has Detroit Rock City and all that on it, right?
Yes, that's the one.
Yep. They had started making a, this was the first album that they did that was not as raw. So, they had some opening sound effects to that song, the whole song is based off a true story about this kid who was on his way to see Kiss, and he was in a car crash and died on his way there in Detroit. And so they wrote a song about it. And at the beginning of the song, it's audio like you'd hear from Pink Floyd or something, where the guy's like washing the dishes or washes his hands or whatever.
You're hearing the radio announcer.
Yeah, he opens up the door, opens up the car door, and gets in, turns it on. The radio's fiddling, and then it starts down, kicks into the song. But that was a change in the tone of their music at that point. It also had what ended up being their biggest and their only massive ballad, but their biggest song ever, which was Beth.
Yeah. And
you want to take Beth?
Oh, so many things could be said about Beth. I'll say a few of those things.
Yes.
At the time, he had sole credit for that song. In more recent years, it's known now that it was co-written. I can't remember the songwriter's name. I just know that, at some point it's revealed, okay, they two wrote the song, but it really seems like from everything I've heard that it's mostly that other writer.
Yeah.
And kind of like with Peter's name on it.
Yeah, I think Stan...
It's like ghost written is what you could almost consider it.
Stan Penridge, I think is his name. He was in a band with Peter Criss. And that guy's wife's name was Rebecca, and they called her Beck. And so that guy wrote the song, basically. Beck, I hear you calling, but I can't come home right now. It's the same song.
Yeah.
And I don't know what Peter Criss, I don't know.
Drug the guy,
Yeah.
Because here's a drink. And the guy's like, I feel a little tired. And the next thing you know, he wakes up in a tub of ice, missing a kidney and a song.
Exactly. Oh, so here, I'll just read this real quick. During drummer Peter Criss's time in the band Chelsea, he and the group's guitarist Stan Penridge decided to write a song that mocked a woman named Becky, the wife of their bandmate, Mike Brand. According to Criss, she regularly called the group during rehearsals to ask when her husband would come home, And this gave them the idea for composing, the first line I just mentioned. Me and the boys are playing, we just can't find the sound. And Criss later said that he composed the song for his first wife, Lydia, which makes no sense because it doesn't say anything about it. But anyway, by 1975, Kiss had released 3 studio albums in which Criss, his compositional contributions were minimal. The only track which appeared to have any of his credits on it was an instrumental, Love Theme from Kiss.
Yes,
which
from
was
their debut album.
It was right, and it was written by all of them because, of course, it was a jamming session.
Yes, that's all it is.
Yeah, and basically he stole the song. I'll say that. I don't know how much.
We're sorry, Peter, but come on.
I mean,
because in this previous band, Penridge did it. He did all the heavy lifting, and he came up with maybe a tempo or some kind of drum accompaniment or something.
Right.
I won't say he did nothing, but
yeah. But that may even be possible. He just barely did anything, and then he brought it to Kiss, and like I said, at this point they were big, right? And I don't know how he would have thought that he was going to get away with it, and according to Paul Stanley in his biography, Peter's he has that raspy voice, which is great, but he's kind of tone deaf. So they would literally have to help guide him as he was singing this song. Once he got it, he could do it. But they're they'd play the piano part and he wouldn't even be in the same key to sing. And they're like, do it like this. But anyway, so he's probably the least talented. No, he's definitely the least talented as far as musically goes of the band. Yeah. But, he seems friendly and stuff. He's, it really helped.
Hey, and something that I saw one of the YouTube clips where basically there was snippets of Paul's audio book.
Mm-hmm, yep.
There's a bunch of those. And in one
I've listened to the whole thing that way on YouTube.
Yeah. So one of the clips was when Peter's first, introducing himself, and almost right out of the gate, he says, "I got a 9-inch cock."
Yeah. That's the first thing he says to him.
And it's not even like, oh, I'm going to say a weird thing to throw him off. It's like, supposedly he's well endowed.
Yeah. He would show everybody his dick.
Yeah. And so that's a weird way to start your career.
Yeah. And also they were really hot on, I think they'd heard his demo tape or whatever. So they thought he'd be good for what they wanted to do. He also said he likes the bands to play, the other musicians to play ahead of the beat. So, that's exactly what they were looking for. But he mentions, hey, hi, are you Peter? Yeah, I've got a 9-inch cock. And okay, good for you. Have a seat. And then, the restaurant they were at had an Asian maitre d' or waiter or whatever it was. And do you remember this part in the story? He basically was rude to the guy and tell him, why don't you go back and get my food, and, stuff like that.
Wow.
Yeah. No. They were I don't know about this, but they were kind of, we liked how he played. We'll see how it goes. So anyway,
undeniably he had a high level of energy.
Yeah.
That they needed.
Yep. Kiss is not Kiss without Peter Criss. It's all, mm-hmm. He's not Neil Peart, he's not Alex Van Halen, he's not Buddy Rich, but he's Peter Criss. He had what they needed.
I like what he brought to the band,
Yeah. Yeah.
And the vocals he does have the raspy voice, and in a way that works to his advantage, kind of like the way it works for Rod Stewart.
Yeah. Yeah. And Paul Stanley wrote, supposedly Peter Criss wrote Beth. And of course, as we mentioned, that's not completely true. And he sang it and he had the raspy voice. Well, Paul Stanley wrote a song for Rod Stewart, Hard Luck Woman. And
okay.
Yeah.
I forgot about this little story. No wonder it fits so well.
Yeah. Yeah. He wanted Rod to sing it, and for some reason it never happened. So they were like, all right, well, Peter's kind of got that voice.
I could have even imagined that on a Rod Stewart album.
Yeah.
With most of the band, the Faces, backing him on that.
Yeah.
which is what pretty much they were doing on his early solo albums.
I'd love to hear it, to be honest, because it's a cool song.
Yeah, but anyway, so that totally makes sense now.
Yeah, and so they another little aside about Peter Criss's Peter. He so Ace Frehley, the nickname that they gave him, they didn't call him Space Ace around, when they were hanging out. They called him the Chef because, and this was in Gene Simmons's book. So like you said, Paul Stanley had his book and it's on YouTube, read by Paul Stanley. Gene Simmons has the same thing. And he said that Peter pulled his dick out and put it on Ace Frehley's shoulder, and Ace was asleep. They were taking pictures. It's Peter's Criss's dick right there. And they're all laughing, and he wakes up and he looks over and he sees Peter Criss's dick on his shoulder and he kisses it.
Yeah.
So, what the fuck? So they were like, he had to taste, he always had to taste stuff. So it would be like, whether it was earwax or he'd see some stain on a seat or something, he'd touch it and smell it and lick it. It was like he always had to, he just was weird. He was also weird with numbers and money. He would have to have like, I guess he's like a numerologist or whatever, right? So he would have this thing where if they'd go to get something to eat and it was, $38.52, he would try to find something on the menu that would make it like $39.39 or 38.38 or 38.83 or something. He wanted to have some kind of numbers that made.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So it was a kind of, he's a wild dude. So his Space Ace
OCD
suits him well.
a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can kind of see how, or maybe why he would have gone down some of the drinking and drug route.
Yeah.
It's like you're self-medicating something. It's like, that's almost to the point of being almost a disability, almost, wow.
Yeah. Right. It is a disability because it definitely changes things in your life and how you deal with other people. So we'll talk about a few of those things when we get to when the end of when they break up. So they, were killing it. They were doing great. And then in, let me see, I'm trying to find the year that, okay. So disco became a very big thing, as everybody knows. And most people hated disco. I shouldn't say that. In retrospect, people loved it because it was like the most popular music in the world.
But rock fans did not appreciate it.
No, we didn't. Rock fans didn't like it because it was kicking all the rock bands off the radio. And and
when you look at most disco performers, it's just a singer. There is no band.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Great. It's a great point. Yeah. So you could watch, Midnight Special or Dick Clark or something like that, or any of those things, and they'd come out and sing "It's Raining Men" or whatever, and it's like just singers. That's it. And so if you're into rock music, you like the fact that there are people playing instruments in those bands, even if they're like on American Bandstand, Top of the Pops,
just faking
it. Yeah, you at least know they actually do play these instruments. So
here's something that everyone needs to spend an afternoon doing.
Mm-hmm.
Just go through like Top of the Pops videos on YouTube.
Yeah.
And you get to see so many bands, even in the late 60s, like are already to the point of they hate doing these things. And they're like so obviously not playing.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it was famously, I'm trying to remember who was it that.
I mean, there's certainly the Who and Keith Moon is like in several scenes where he's not even trying to fake playing the part.
Yeah, and there was another band that was a smaller band. I can't remember who they were, but they were like strumming their guitars and hitting the just like not even playing, not, like you give it to children and they pretend like they're playing guitar or something. And the guy's mouthing the song, but he's mouthing a different song. So it's like clearly not synced up with what he's doing. And I can appreciate that, but also it's like, look, dude, you're getting a lot of eyeballs on you here. we know what the deal is. It's like people who go out and sing the national anthem at the Super Bowl. That's recorded because they don't have time to set all this stuff up. And if something goes wrong, not good.
Yeah. So there is a certain level of, well, let's try to be professional. But I think it's just after a certain number of years of doing this, some of those bands, they got so jaded about doing more of them that for them, it's tough, which gets back to the level of professionalism of Kiss and that you've got a part to play.
Yeah. Yeah. You owe it to, and whether it's Paul's or Gene's biographies, they are constantly saying it's all for the fans. Nothing. They owe every single thing to the fans. There's no bad mood. There's no broken heart. There's no, anything, I'm going to go to jail in 2 weeks. None of that matters. When you're playing in front of a live crowd, you owe it to them to give your 100% because they're paying you.
But honestly, it's, to me, the way they set themselves up with these characters, you're in costume. It's easier to be ramped up because you're already playing something that's not you.
Right.
You're already revved for that. You're already in the right headspace for it.
Yeah.
And on top of that, you're constantly moving. So that's like a workout. And when you're physically stressed, you can't be stressed about anything else. So it's like, that's your high.
Yeah. Yeah. And in Gene's case, that was the only high other than sex.
Well, yes.
So I think Paul Stanley barely ever drank, but he would occasionally, but he didn't do a lot. He didn't smoke or do drugs. Gene Simmons didn't smoke or do drugs or anything like that, but he had a definite sex addiction. And according to him, he has a Polaroid or a picture of every woman he's been with, and it's like 20,000 or some shit, some crazy.
Last I read, it was he said 5,000. So,
okay, well that's more believable.
Yes, whereas Wilt Chamberlain, was 20,000.
Yeah, and they went back and did the math, and it's like that means that from the day you were born, you've had to have sex with like 2 women at a time.
Yeah, I know. So let's be realistic. He was probably more like 5,000.
Yes, and let's also be realistic. That's gross. So
yeah, I know.
When you're a kid, when you're a teenager, like, man, all the women and partying all the time, and you have these houses and cars and famous and everything, and it's like, okay, you end up by the time you're 30, you've got all these STDs, you've got an alcohol problem with drugs that are running your life. It's not as glamorous as what it seems from the outside, but they avoided that. At least those two guys did. Peter Criss and Ace Frehley, not as much, but
they also were more educated early on.
Oh yeah, true. Yeah, they just had a different mindset.
So they were had their heads set better. Whereas to me, Ace and Peter, they both were just like live for the day attitude.
Yeah,
they never looked ahead.
Nope. It was now, right now. That's why I'm alive right now. I don't care about anything else.
And so I think the two of them were the ones more likely to get into abuse because they were never long picture, big picture. Yeah.
And so they were definitely some threads were unraveling in the band by 1978. Because they had
ironically, their probably biggest year.
Yeah. Well, yeah, maybe the next year might have been the biggest year, but that they had their Peter Criss was unhappy. Ace Frehley was ready to leave the band. And so they said, hey, how about this? Because let's take a little break, but we don't want people to think we're breaking up. So let's each of us make a solo album. And actually, Ace's is the best one, I think, of the solo albums.
Yes,
so
I highly agree with that.
It's just got to.
What if I said, "Oh, Ace's album, horrible." Paul's, I love Paul's.
Yeah,
you would have taken me seriously.
I would not have taken you seriously. No.
No offense, Paul, but let's face it, Ace has got the best rock album.
Yeah, he's right. And honestly, Paul, you're the most talented of these four guys. So that you're the one that's written the lion's share of all of their music and their best music for the most part. I mean, Gene has some good ones, and he's co-written stuff with Ace in particular. Ace was good at coming up with riffs and things like that. So, but I think that Paul Stanley is the most talented of the original four in particular. So,
well, probably at least with songwriting, if nothing else,
right?
He was. He was the furthest along.
He has a cool voice. He's a good guitar player. So he really didn't have any glaring weaknesses. He had a lot of charisma, and he was a really good front man. And so they made these four solo, or each one of them made a solo album. They all came out at the same time, and other than New York Groove, I'm back in the New York Groove, which was a cover.
Yes. Russ Ballard, I believe.
Yes, right. Yep. And
there's another Kiss Russ Ballard connection.
What's that?
God Gave Rock and Roll to You.
Oh, did he do that one too?
Yeah, he did that originally with his band Argent.
Huh. I didn't realize that. But that was, yes, I guess, that was Kiss's last hit, wasn't it?
I don't know.
I think
it was a hit for them at the time. There was a comeback.
Yeah, I think that was their last hit. Because after that it was just touring, and they just played all the hits and stuff that people wanted to hear.
Oh, okay.
So anyway, they they made those. It was not a financial success, I don't believe. And this was in 78. And then later in 78, not too long after that, actually, they had made what they thought would be a mix of Hard Day's Night by the Beatles and Star Wars. They made the classic Kiss Meets the Phantom of the Park, which debuted on NBC October 28th, which is 2 days after we are recording this, actually, or before. Yeah. In 1978. So
yeah, I'm pretty sure 78 was by that point their biggest year. Maybe 79 will be a little better because of the fact they had the Dynasty album out and the single. But if you want to just put like who had more going on in that year,
right,
for a band, 78 was their year.
Yeah, they had Kiss Alive 2 came out and it went multi-platinum.
I think the Greatest Hits double platinum had come out. If not, it was a year maybe later. But yeah, regardless. Yeah, but anyway, they were on the radar. It was like everybody that day was going to watch that damn movie.
Yes, I remember being in school and everybody was excited. Everybody was talking about it, and I was so excited. And I was going to go down to my grandfather's house and watch it. And when I got there, I fell asleep. So I woke up actually, I think I started watching the first 20 minutes of it, and then I fell asleep. And I woke up, it was over, and I was so mad because I was like, man, I missed it. I can't believe it. I can't believe I fell asleep. Oh, I'm so mad at myself. Because, at the time, it wasn't like I had any way to record it or to look it back up. It was just one and done. And
I'll tell you, we loved it. We loved that as kids.
Yeah, you and Jeff?
Yeah. Oh, my God. Even though every commercial break, they'd have the whoever was the announcer saying, coming after these messages, they'd say, Kiss Meets the Phantom of the Park with Gene Simmons.
Oh, God. Yeah. That really, come on, man.
Like, come on. It's like, okay, maybe Gene Simmons is not a household name at this point, but God.
I mean, it's Simmons.
So it just made no sense why they pronounce it that way when it's Simmons. But
right. It's not like it was a Y. S-Y. It was S-I. So anyway.
Yeah, but anyway, but we loved it, even though it was cheesy as hell. But the one other thing that came out that year, wasn't it December in 78? certain Star Wars
Oh yes,
programming
that one.
option.
Yep.
That we knew it was terrible.
Yeah.
That one, as we're watching it, we're not liking it.
Yes.
But this Kiss one, this thing here, yeah, fantastic. I don't know what to like more. The obvious, African American stunt double for Ace.
I know. Yeah.
The overdubbed all of Peter's vocals, or rather, all of his dialogue, I should say.
Yeah. Yeah.
No idea about that back then.
Folks, are y'all listening to what he's saying? they literally overdubbed all of the lines that Peter Criss had with somebody else's voice, and it wasn't even like they improved it, right? I don't know why they did it. And and Ace, anytime, it wasn't even just stunts. Sometimes he just was too drunk to show up, and so since he had this makeup on and stuff, they had a black guy, who's wearing his makeup, and you can tell he's a black guy. He just has makeup on. It's now maybe looking at it on the TVs at the time, it may not have been quite as obvious.
Yeah, it wasn't high def by any means.
Yeah, you can look at it now.
I think it was 3 dots by 2 dots.
Right. Yeah, you'd be lucky if it's in color. And of
course, the color and the color is flickering in and out.
Right. Yeah.
Unless you can get the rabbit ears just right.
Right. Well, luckily it was on NBC, which we could pick up pretty clearly.
Oh yeah. We did have a couple that were solid, but then there was the other one, the iffy one.
Yeah, ABC was the one that was bad for us. But it's awful. I highly suggest you guys go out and watch. You can watch it streaming on YouTube now. I mean, like it's up there. I don't have to
I actually have the 2005 DVD.
Sweet.
It was like almost immediately taken off the market. Cheesy Flicks would put it out, and I think Gene Simmons must have this sense. He knows a disturbance in the force, and he immediately had cease and desist letters out. It's like every father who's like, "Did someone touch a thermostat?"
And so the plot of this thing is
what do we do a synopsis of this?
Yes, so the plot of it is basically that this guy at this amusement park, he's the genius behind all their cool rides and stuff, and they're like going to fire him or something. I can't remember. He does something.
There were some budget cuts, they said, so they were like, we're going to have to like cut back severely on what you've been doing.
Yeah, and he had made a bunch of automatons, right? So they were not really, I guess, robots. They basically were robots. As any kids in the audience, just think Five Nights at Freddy's. Only he was using Wolfman and Dracula and all this. So, of course, that's what Kiss finds out, that this guy's going to blow them up. He's going to blow Kiss up because he's mad that Kiss is going to be playing there, and all the kids want to come and see the rock band instead of come and see his automatons, which is
his animatronics, essentially.
That's what it is, animatronics. Yeah. So
the one burly character actor that looks kind of like Mel Sharples, tells Anthony Zerb, or however you pronounce his name, you can't keep doing what you're doing.
Right.
And he's like, but all my research.
Yeah.
He doesn't like the fact that it's going to go to hell. So he just stays hidden there working on his stuff.
Yeah. And right. Hidden. He's like in his
it's a phantom.
Like the Phantom of the Opera. And he just, it's very bad. It has some quite funny moments that I don't think were meant to be funny. But it was clearly made with kids in mind, which at this point Kiss was starting to become more, I should say, less cool to a lot of their original fans.
Oh, right, because by the time we're into them, we're youngins. We're not teenagers. We're not, we're like, golly gee whiz, I like this.
Yeah, Kiss is great. I remember my brother, who's 5 years older than me, and my sister, who's 2.5 years younger, we'd take like broomsticks and stuff and would play the Kiss album, and we'd just be pretending like we're Kiss and jamming with them and stuff. And it always made me mad. My brother would, whoever was singing, that's who he would. I'll be Gene this time.
Oh man,
it's like it's God of Thunder. Yeah, but I'll be Gene. You be Paul. What?
Oh man.
So
and interestingly enough, though, when we would be, lip syncing and pretending to play guitar, both of us were trying to do like the guitar. None of us were trying to be Peter Criss. So if we had any of our friends over, it's like, well, you're going to be not anyone on the drums.
Yeah. My brother, since you said that, I remember now that when Beth came on, he'd be Peter Criss, but he put the chair in the thing, so he wouldn't like sit behind the drum. There were no drums in the song, right? So
yeah,
he'd be Peter Criss. You bastard! You wanted to be everybody. I didn't get to be anybody. But it's definitely Mystery Science Theater 3000 or riff tracks kind of stuff. Now they asked for years and years and years for them to do Kiss Meets the Phantom of the Opera or Phantom of the Park, but as one of them pointed out, it's pretty boring. Sometimes it's hard to make yes, it's bad, so you can make fun of it, but it's also not bad in a way that is entertaining, unlike the Star Wars one.
And the other thing to think of is the fact that a lot of what made it kid friendly was just editing choices, whether it's particular background music or scenes. So with that in mind, folks, if you can find the European release of Kiss Meets the Phantom, supposedly much superior.
Huh.
Like they didn't have the Hanna-Barbera music playing. It's actually was released on one of their like DVD releases where they had various like live performances and whatever. One of the other track features was the European version of the movie.
The one that I saw or that I have is so like there's a scene where the kids are getting food and you hear Christine 16 playing. And so it's it has some of the Kiss music that plays through the certain spots, but yeah, it does have as somebody's running through the park, because there's like a boyfriend and girlfriend, and like the girl's father is the Phantom or whatever. Can't remember, but yeah, so it's pretty terrible.
Oh, I know. The girl's boyfriend gets taken over.
Oh yeah,
he's made it to an animatronic,
right?
But that guy, like a year or so before, he was the main character on Arc 2, Kids Saturday Morning Show live action,
and he slummed. He probably thought, "All right, man, this is the start." No, it's the end.
Yeah, really. He thought, "Oh man, I'm moving up. I'm actually going to be made into a TV movie. No more of this Saturday morning crap."
Yeah, Paul said that when they were seeing it, because they had like a premiere for it and everything, he said that from the moment it came on, he just kept going deep, getting lower and lower in his chair, like, I don't even want anybody to know I'm here. But Ace said he just cackled through the whole thing. He was like, it was so terrible, I couldn't help but laugh.
Well, yeah, well, that kind of fits with Ace's sense of humor,
right? Yeah,
he doesn't take anything seriously, so why start there?
Speaking of, that reminds me of a story Gene tells. So Ace collected Nazi memorabilia. Now, that's not something that's uncommon. People, they're not necessarily Nazis, but they definitely had some really cool imagery and design sensibilities and their posters and stuff.
There's someone else who collected German World War II.
Yeah, Ozzy.
Lemmy.
Ozzy. Who?
Lemmy
Kilmeister?
Yes.
Yeah. So I think he and Ozzy like that stuff.
And also, just to let you know, Keith Emerson, who is keyboardist.
Yeah, Emerson, Lake and Palmer.
Lake and Palmer. And before that, he was in a band called The Nice. And he had a thing he would do where he would jam a knife into the organ, hold one of the keys back. But he's doing like distortion and stuff, crazy stuff that you would do with an organ. But he got that knife from Lemmy, who at one point was a roadie.
Wow. Small world.
Yes. Yeah. Everyone ran into everyone in Britain.
Yeah. Yeah. And these guys in England, they are not fans of Nazis. Their whole their cities were destroyed by these guys. So,
yeah.
But it's fascinating design aesthetic and all that. So a lot of people are appealed to it, but in this case, Gene heard a knock on his door He opened it up.
Oh, I've heard this story. Yeah.
Yeah, he opens it up, and there's Ace wearing a SS uniform, and he does the Heil Hitler thing. And again, not a Nazi, but making light of it. And he said, I got this. I just bought this whole uniform. And Gene, whose mom is a Holocaust survivor, said, if you ever come anywhere near me wearing anything like that again, I'm going to kill you.
Yeah.
And so it never happened again, even though, he was somebody who was a bit off his rocker. So you never know what he would do, but he clearly got the message there.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's just Ace had very little impulse control.
Yeah.
If something got in his head, like, oh yeah, this'll get him,
Right.
without thinking through the whole thing,
Gene didn't mention anything about him knowing that his mom was a Holocaust survivor. But if my mom was a Holocaust survivor, everybody I know would know about it. So
yeah. But anyway, I don't, like I say, it was like the one time. But I think it was in Paul's book. He mentioned at some point, like Ace and Peter would do little digs at him, like he said,
being Jews, you mean?
Yeah, or just of the stereotype. And it's like, well, we couldn't help, the fact that we were, we came from a hardworking, background. We worked hard to get what we were getting.
Oh, I gotcha. As if they had this advantage because they're Jews.
Yeah, they were, sometimes they would, but that's because also those guys were, Ace and Peter, I think Brooklyn, Bronx, they were kind of like that working class.
Yeah.
So it was a weird combination, as Gene and Paul both were willing to expand their palettes, as it were.
Right.
Get more into the business side of things, wanting to expand out into thinking more of like a media type empire. Those guys were just more like wanted to be in a band.
Right. Yeah. I mean, they didn't get into Kiss thinking it was going to end up being Kiss.
Yeah, they got into it, and I guess they all wanted. At one point, they all had an idea of where they were going, but then I think after that, there was no further dream or perspective for Ace or Peter. I'm not saying that's wrong or not. I just feel like they were definitely always more live in the moment. Didn't have any big idea of what it was going to be.
I was watching.
The others did,
I was watching a thing that was on MTV or maybe VH1. It was called "When Kiss Ruled the World." I think it was. In it, they mentioned how the night that they played Madison Square Garden, they were like, this is MSG. This is as big as it gets. And when they were kids, they would dream about it, all four of them.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, it was like they never truly believed that they were going to play there. They're like, man, one day I'll be in a band and I'll play. It was a dream. It was like a silly dream. Right. And, so when they played there that night, they were just giddy. And Peter tells a nice story how his parents were there, like in the front row, and he's singing Beth, and the crowd's going crazy, and they're now multimillionaires and playing in Madison Square Gardens, and their parents never really got the whole rock and roll and dressing up and all that thing. They didn't really get it, but they could get this. They knew what this was. And he said he looked down and his parents were crying and he was crying, and tears come down the side of his makeup. And it was just a real powerful moment. I thought it was pretty cool. So that night, that 88, 78, that was a amazing year for them. As you said, probably their greatest. Yes. But the next year was when they just went into a totally different, like Elvis level big kind of thing, like as big as you can get.
Like everyone knows who they are.
Everybody knows who they are. You cannot escape them. They're on the radio all over the place. And that was their album Dynasty. Now, Dynasty, I mentioned before how disco had taken over, and a lot of bands, whether it was Rolling Stones or whoever, they had some songs that had some disco flavor to them, which would piss off their fans. Well, Kiss, this song was "I Was Made for Loving You," which is a great song. And it was a huge hit, a huge smash. But really, to be honest, the only thing that's disco about it has this kind of repetitious so you could dance to it, as opposed to their regular rock
Yeah.
that they play, Detroit Rock City.
I mean, there's definitely portions of it that are disco-like, but it's done in a way that it's still rock. It's just rock with a disco feel.
Right. And that album also, it has a lot of songs on it that I like.
Actually, one of the few, I think the only song that's got Peter singing on it. That's a great song.
In Dynasty?
Yes.
Dirty Living.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great
cool
song.
Yeah. And but I love Sure Know Something. I love that
That's
song.
a great one. Yes. I started listening to this album, I want to say 6 months ago, just for the lulz, as the kids say.
Right.
And yeah, I did say, man, that one really impressed me.
Yeah, it's got this, dun 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 dun. It's just got this kicks in. It's really good. I love that. It's one of my favorite Kiss songs. But of course, I Was Made for Loving You. That's the biggest hit. My daughter, she loved it when she was much younger, and we watched a Kiss meets Scooby-Doo or whatever it was. And in it, they play this song, so she loved it. So whenever we hear that, I think of her. But
yeah,
this was my first concert, Kiss, 1979.
Holy shit!
And my mom took me to the Roanoke Civic Center. My brother went, and he was like 15 or whatever at the time, and he wouldn't take me. That'll tell you, folks, where Gen X was. If he would be willing to take me, my 15-year-old brother, my mom would have let her 10-year-old son go with his 15-year-old brother to see Kiss by themselves. Mm-hmm. So that's where we were. But he wouldn't do it. I really wanted to go, so she took me, and I've always told that story as a shining example of how much my mom loved me, because she definitely didn't like Kiss. But it was a awesome show. I remember when the lights had gone down and Kiss was getting ready to start, and you're like, hear this background music, and then you see 4 lights come up from underneath the stage, very bright, shining up, and then you see these 4 statues of Kiss come up, and then I was like, man, that's cool. I wonder if they're going to interact with those statues and stuff. And it was them. They were just staying still. It was just so believable. Wow. And they just kicked into the music, and the place went crazy. And wow. Yeah, it was great. Now, Peter Criss had the drum kit at that point where it had the automatic thing where it would lift up in the air.
Yeah, it had the risers.
Yeah. And so the whole thing was great. It was amazing. It blew my mind. I mean, I'm seeing, one of the greatest performing rock bands of all time in their prime, and you could tell at that time it was really awesome. And, so it took them to a totally different level, but it was also really the beginning of I say beginning. I mean, it was
already kind of the end because that was the second album that I think Peter Criss didn't even play drums on.
Right. Yeah. He was replaced by
Eric Carr.
Nope. No. On this one, it was Anton.
Anton Fig. Yeah, Anton Fig did the drums, and the reason he did the drums on the album was because Anton Fig had played drums on Ace's solo album.
Oh, so they had that connection. It says
Anton Fig and Will Lee on bass. Now those 2 guys were in Letterman's band.
Oh, that makes sense.
80s Letterman band before they became the Paul.
Paul Schaefer.
Paul Schaefer Orchestra or whatever. It was just the Paul Schaefer, the world's most dangerous band.
Right.
That's what they call themselves.
It says here that Peter Criss was recovering from a car wreck, but I know that also Criss had really gotten to the point where he, his drugs and alcohol were so bad that, like you said, the previous album, he really didn't have a lot to do with it. And one of the things I saw in here was, or saw today when I was watching some stuff, there was another session musician that came in and played for Ace. Now, Ace was unreliable at this point. All he wanted to do was be, drunk, and he didn't care about anything at that point. Just barely, when we're going to play live, I'll show up. Other than that, I don't really care. And I mean, he did a couple songs on this album, but
you could see how drunk he was on the Tom Snyder Tomorrow Show.
Right. He's like cackling like a freaking lunatic, which he is. So, it worked out. But so they had this kind of made me laugh. The guitarist, I can't remember his name off the top of my head. I'm sorry, but they asked him to come in and play because Ace wasn't there. And when he got out of the session, Ace was there. He was sitting in the thing. He just didn't bother to come in and play. And he asked the guy, he said, "Hey, how did I sound today?" And the guitarist told him, "Oh, it sounded great. Best you ever have." So, those two guys had checked out at this point, and Paul and Gene.
Well, it was just bigger than anything they'd imagined, and they were discontent, and they were like, "I don't want to go do any more than what I've already done."
Right. They were unhappy. Yeah, right. I think you hit the nail on the head. They were bigger than they ever thought they'd be. They were seeing their faces everywhere. They had more money than they could ever spend, really, and which turned out to be not true because apparently they all went broke. But or those two went broke, and
well, the others, Gene and Paul, almost went broke just from the mismanagement. They fortunately fired Bill, and they went with other management at some point.
Yeah. But once those millions are gone, they're gone. So basically, I think it was right around this time, Peter Criss decided to leave. He was done right after this album and tour, which, kind of made headlines everywhere. And Gene and Paul bought the Catman image. They were like, okay, we're going to buy
bought him out.
Yeah, it was like buying you out on, on your song rights, except for Beth, I guess, which he had, co-wrote. So any of the ones that said written by Kiss, he was no longer going to get money from it. They were,
they were just buying him out on all of that, so there wouldn't be anything in perpetuity.
That's right, and the Catman name and image, and which is why the guys that play for him now use those. That.
They can use it. Yeah.
Later, when Ace decided to leave or was fired or whichever happened,
whichever narrative is correct.
Right. They bought Space Ace, all that stuff, same thing. So when
I'm pretty sure they did, because they couldn't have just then said, "Hey, Tommy Thayer, now you're Space Ace."
Yeah, they totally did. I know for a fact
because they would have been all in the news. Ace Frehley would have been suing the shit out of them.
Yeah, right, and unending mess that they wouldn't want to deal with, and because Gene and Paul, they really were the main guys. And there was quite a while where even Gene had checked out, according to both Gene and Paul's autobiographies.
Well, yeah, he was with Cher. He was getting into trying to be more with Hollywood.
So they made one more album after this, I think. That was
Unmasked was once again another one that came out in '80. That had no Peter Criss drumming, even though he was still in the band. Right,
came out May 20th, 1980. Ace was still with them. And
he was going to be on 2 more albums.
And they brought in Eric Carr.
But he had a new persona, even though they had bought out Peter.
Yeah, his persona was Fox, right? That was
he was the Fox.
Yeah. And so they did. Somebody had suggested to him, "Hey, your sales, you peaked with Dynasty. It's all going down now. You've lost Peter Criss. Why don't we do Unmasked? You guys just unmask." And actually, it says here that Peter Criss was on the cover of Unmasked.
Right, as I mean, on Unmasked, it's at that point, it's still as if he was in the band.
And it's Anton Fig that play. He did nothing.
So that's what it was. It was Dynasty, then the Unmasked album where Peter didn't play. Because the one before Dynasty was Love Gun, and he definitely played on that one.
This was the Unmasked was the first album. Now I had it, but it wasn't very good, I didn't think, compared to what I was
used
never
to. Had it. Yeah. Never had that one.
It's the first album since their Dressed to Kill album that didn't go platinum.
Well, yeah. I didn't even know at the time that album was even out.
Right. I remember because the artwork.
Yeah. I only was years later, oh, they did have another album? Look at that. And
yeah.
And I was into Kiss, and I didn't even know that album was out.
Yeah. I mean, that's why I had the album, because I was into them, and I was like, this isn't that good, But I didn't
think
know
I
all
had
the
checked
drama.
out. I think I had checked out by the time Dynasty came out. For me, it was like, I don't want to do this anymore. I started checking out, but hearing it years later, it's like I really reevaluate the album.
Yeah, they had Kiss. They were talented
Well,
guys,
and they brought in a lot of good guys too. When they would outsource, I should say, they brought in some great songwriters and great session musicians. So they knew what they were doing, and
yeah, for sure. And there's a reason why we're still talking about Kiss. They were definitely a talented group of guys. They knew what they were doing, not just image. The image helped. Oh, these guys look neat, and they'd go in and be like, yeah, I liked a bunch of those songs. But so Peter Criss is gone. They make Unmasked. It's kind of a flop. Things aren't going well. They get either fire or he leaves. Ace Frehley. Like we said, they buy him out.
No, there's a little more time here. You're going to miss a couple crucial moments, such as their follow-up to Unmasked, the concept album, The Elder.
Oh, yeah.
Now, everybody talks as if this album is toxic and it's a nightmare. I listened to it, maybe only once, but I listened to it thinking, can it really be that bad? It's better than you think it is. Gene actually sings. Not whatever that raspy thing he normally is trying to do. He's actually can sing. So give it a try. The reason I think it just did not fare well is because it was so unlike anything else they were doing. I think people were just like, I'm not looking to do some high concept thing with Kiss.
Right.
So people just instantly like weren't on board. So if you just go into it with an open mind, like, what's this going to sound like? It's better than you think. And you might be pleasantly surprised. But that stunk for them career wise.
Right.
And Ace said, I knew that wasn't going to go over. I just knew it, So they then said, well, we got to get back to doing some real honest to God rock album material.
Yeah.
And that's when Creatures of the Night came out.
Which was 1982. And they had replaced Ace at that point, right?
Ace was on that one. That was his last album with them. He made appearances. I don't know how much of the tour he did, but I know he's like in the video for I Love It Loud.
That song, I like it, and then it ends, and then it's quiet for like 4 or 5 seconds, and then it starts to fade back in and has another like 45 seconds of I Like It Loud. It's like, why didn't you just end it there? It's a better song. I don't get it. But anyway,
I think it's a different edit for radio versus what was on the album anyway. But
yeah. But when I hear it, I hear that version. But I like the song. Yep. Yeah, that was co-written by Vinnie Vincent. So I'll just jump into Vinnie Vincent here real quick.
Yes, now you start that.
Yeah. So Vinnie Vincent, basically, he was a guitar wizard, especially compared to Ace Frehley. And that was good and it was bad while he was in Kiss. It was good because he really could write some really cool music. And he could play whatever they wanted him to play, basically. It was bad because he would, when they play live and stuff, he would just kind of go, hey, I'm going to have a guitar. This is where the guitar solo is, right? Yeah, okay. I'm going to make it like 3 or 4 times longer than what it was on the album because I'm just going to be jamming. And it really got on their nerves and they couldn't get him to stop.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's face it, everything is well rehearsed. They were not an improvising band. I'm not saying that you couldn't turn some of those things into jams, but I think to be most effective, you got to keep them brief. Like I can imagine Fish doing, Kiss covers. It's possible, but I don't think he should.
I mean, they in Kiss they had, a spot for Gene to spit up blood, and they had a spot for him to, they had to be aware of him, spitting fire, and Paul had to know where, they had to know where Paul was going to be when he jumps off a speaker and does a split in the air. I mean, they had, they rehearsed. They had to have their shit together.
It was well rehearsed, well timed, everything. Right. So for this new guy to come in and just extend it out, it's like, and probably different from what they rehearsed earlier in the day.
Right. It just wasn't their thing. Now, this was a kind of a turning point for the band in many ways, but in one, Eric Carr came in and he's not Catman. Okay, he's the
He's
fox.
another mammal.
Yeah, varmint. And then Vinnie Vincent comes in, and he's not Space Ace. He's the Ankh warrior.
Yeah, exactly. It's still kind of to me like a otherworldly character.
Yes, it's in that same kind of vein in the sense of, I mean, one's science fiction kind of thing. Anyway, whatever. But that basically this was when they realized when he was getting ready to leave, they were getting ready to fire Vinnie Vincent. Paul and Gene were like, you know what? Let's just go with whoever we hire. If we ever have the makeup again, let's have it where we just are our original characters. And whoever we hire, they'll wear Catman and Space Ace. Because, what are you going to do? Every time you have a new band member comes in, they got to think of something else. I mean, it's
exactly. It becomes like Doctor Who. It's like,
right. It's silly, and it wasn't rock and roll, right? Yeah. So they wanted to
at that point you realize your concept is wearing thin.
Right. And so Eric Carr, unfortunately, gets brain cancer. Now
hold on, you gotta like,
I'm forgetting. I'm skimming through a bunch of stuff. So here's
you got to remember, like, Vinnie Vincent leaves, but not before he's already in a video and on the album cover for their first album to feature them sans makeup.
Yep, which is Lick It Up, which is an awesome freaking album. I love that album. It rocks.
Honestly, I don't know much other than whatever was played at the time on the radio or on TV.
Now it's got some really cool stuff. It has a song on it, "All Hell's Breaking Loose," and it's kind of funny because there's one part where the main verse, like Paul Stanley talks and he's like, "Hey man, what be this and what be that?" It's wild, but the guitar riff itself that Vinnie Vincent came up with is wild. It's really cool. The whole main hook of it, it's cool. It's a cool song. So anyway, I always liked Lick It Up. I liked the video. It was wild. I just thought it was cool. It says here that even though Vincent didn't personally mesh well with either Paul or Gene and was dismissed from Kiss at the end of Creatures of the Night tour, he was reinstated with the band for Lick It Up because they couldn't find anybody on such short notice.
Yeah.
Now
I believe that.
Yeah. So they were like, we gotta get this done. He was good. That wasn't the problem. They just had they just didn't mesh well. And so this is where, after that, this is where they kind of start to get into what would become the band for like the next 20 years. They had a guy, they replaced him for the album Revenge with a guy named Mark St. John. He had, what's the carpal tunnel syndrome.
Oh, okay.
They didn't call it that at the time. I had a poster in my room when I was in high school, and he's got Mark St. John's is a picture of him, and you can see like his right hand is like, or left hand is like swollen really bad, and so that's why he didn't last long. He had to leave because of that. He just couldn't play, and this was real early on when people were not aware of what carpal tunnel syndrome was. It was like, I just have problems with my hands.
Or I got tendonitis or something.
Right. Something like that. So then they made album in 84 called Animalize, right?
Yeah, I think that was the one. And then after that they had Crazy in the Heat, or I don't know. I'll be honest, I didn't keep track of them in their
Crazy Nights.
Yeah.
So they had Lick It Up. So it was high school, but Lick It Up was awesome. And then they had Animalize that came out in 84. And it had Heaven's on Fire was their big hit from that. And of course, Kiss had run its course at this point. But they still would have a song every now and then. You'd be like, hey, that was pretty decent. And
everything they did, it was like really addictive, hook laden,
Yeah. I mean, at this point, Paul Stanley in particular is he's a prolific songwriter. He's written hundreds of songs. In 87, they had Crazy Nights. And then the next year they released a Greatest Hits, Smashes, Thrashes, and Hits is what it was called.
Maybe then I'm thinking of Hot in the Shade. I don't know.
Crazy Nights was the single off of that one.
Okay.
Let's see. Kiss ended the decade in 1989, releasing Hot in the Shade. So there it is, which shows the cover is the Sphinx wearing sunglasses.
Yeah.
It says, although the album failed to achieve platinum status, it spawned the hit ballad Forever, which was co-written by Michael Bolton. So it does not get more rock and roll than that.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. My God.
So it made it to number 8 in the U.S. and was the highest charting single since Beth, which was another top 10.
You know, the thing, getting back to Beth and ballads in general, everyone at the time in the late 70s was putting out a ballad. And once again, the parallel, Alice Cooper, by then in his solo career, 77, he had, but he had a couple of ballads going in from like his first solo album, Only Women Bleed. And then I think every album after that, he had a ballad. But, you know, his last charting song, I think, was a ballad in 77, 78. If only I had some way to look that up.
Yeah, I know. We don't have that kind of technology.
Yeah. But anyway, so it's part and parcel of the thing. Just like we were talking about how they did a song that sounds like disco. Well, so many rock bands were putting out songs that had a disco feel to them.
Right.
So it's basically like you're following trends.
Yeah.
Sometimes you're following them and that's setting them.
Yep. Right. And that's usually not the best way to do it.
Right.
So basically, we'll kick it into high gear here because they've basically run their course as far as like making any new music at this point. It's not that their music was terrible. It just, wasn't, by 1992, Kiss was going up against, grunge, right? Which just enveloped everything. And there's only 2 hard rock bands that had multi-platinum albums at this time period. One was Van Halen and one was Ozzy Osbourne. So, they weren't quite there.
No.
So, one of the things that happened in 1995 was they did MTV Unplugged and they brought in the original band, right? So the funny thing is, if you listen to the biographies, they'll tell you that Peter Criss hadn't played drums probably in like 5-6 years at this point. So they went and got the guy that ended up being like the drummer that was with them from this moment until 25 years later when they finally did their very, very final thing. Let me see if I can find his name, because he had been in Black Sabbath. He had been in Badlands. I could tell you his name off the top. Eric Singer. Eric Singer was his name. And they hired Tommy Thayer to replace Space Ace. But those 2 guys took on the Catman
original characters, yes.
Spaceman. Yeah. So when they did the Unplugged, they brought them in for 2 reasons. One, at this point, they'd been with the band basically as long as Peter and Ace had been, and Paul and Gene felt like they shouldn't be just discarded, because they were good, they were loyal, and they were much better musicians, or at least instrumentalists. And then Peter Criss couldn't play, and Ace Frehley hadn't played very much either, so they were just really rusty. So that's why they were like, we'll have these other guys up here. That's why they had both their drummers on that show playing at the same time. And on
the Unplugged,
yeah.
I think on the Unplugged show is basically original band and latest lineup of Kiss.
Yeah, it was Singer and Tommy Thayer, and so again, that's why they did it. Was they didn't want these guys to get screwed over. Plus, they knew that Ace and Peter, they just couldn't hang. And while Ace had been the lead guitarist for them for a long time, Paul at this point had been playing twice as long as Ace really was. So, he was already really good at this point. That came out. Everybody was excited. Tupac Shakur introduced them on the MTV Music Awards, and the original lineup came out in their makeup, which was the first time they'd been in their makeup for quite a while. So everybody was freaking out, and they decided to do their world tour, which was first time that like a band was getting $100 a ticket. So tickets were selling for $100.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And
hard to believe.
Yeah. That was in the 90s, right? So,
yep. I remember one of the first bands to really, people raising a stink about were the Eagles when they got back together.
Right.
And they're like, charging $75.
Right.
It's like, fuck the fees.
Yeah,
They're like $75.
right. Yeah, so you're paying $150 for $70 tickets.
Yeah.
But
It's like, I want to just go back to the movies for a nickel, pops.
right.
It's been decades now.
Yeah, yeah. And I get it. I get it. But Kiss was like, this is our reunion tour and we're going to do it. It's going to be a success. And it was. So but they kept on. They were on the road for a long, long time. Their tours, each time they would go out, whether it was with the regular band, the original lineup, which I think they only did once. And then it was obvious.
They did, I think, 2 tours, actually.
Two tours.
They had the initial reunion.
Mm-hmm.
Then a year or so later, Psycho Circus was released. And so then they could tour behind an album with supposedly the original lineup, although once again, Peter did not play that much on the album.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think that follow-up tour, whether they did one just for that album and then one more, which was considered their last tour, which was in 99, 2000,
something like that.
Period. Yeah. Their farewell tour, but really was farewell to Ace and Peter.
Right. That's what it was. And, but they sold out everywhere they went. So they weren't, it's not like they were, say, Cheap Trick or something. No offense, Cheap Trick, great band and everything. But, you'll see.
They could get their venues up.
Right.
They could keep up. In fact, if anything, they probably got bigger,
getting
back in the makeup than they had been in the last decade.
Yep. And this last, the very last tour that they had that just ended, I think at the beginning of this year or late last year, whichever one it was. I think it was supposed to start in, but COVID stopped it. So, that tour was a massive, massive, massive success. Sold out, not like stadiums. They were selling out stadiums everywhere they went. Now there was some, controversy with. It seemed that a couple times they were, they had a backtrack that were playing, and they were singing, but may not have been playing the song or whatever. And some people had had some problems with that. It was never proven. But whatever the case, these guys are now in their 70s.
But the other thing, though, is like playing with a backing track. Like you're still playing, but you've got the track playing as well. I mean, shit, man. In like 78, I believe, ELO was doing that. So, so it's not like it's never been done before.
I mean, Van Halen, when they played Jump, Eddie Van Halen didn't play keyboards and then jump on the guitar. He played the guitar, and the keyboards were played over the speakers to a track. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, it wasn't like, anybody was fooled that he must be playing it with his mind, Yeah. So he's beaming it directly into
He's got temples. He's cloned himself, but he made the clone invisible.
It's totally legit.
This guy's a genius.
That's awesome. But, so anyway, so they finally hung it up very recently, very, very recently, April, I believe it was. And that was,
let's say everyone says they hang it up. Let's see if they really, really hung it up.
I think that this is the first time I've seen Paul Stanley say, we're not going to just go on anymore. We have nothing left to prove,
Well, that's a good point. Very good point.
And they're in their 70s. They're right. Like 74, 75. So it's tough. It's real hard on it's hard on young men.
Yeah.
Much less.
Touring is just, it's a tough deal for anyone to do.
Yeah. And these guys, especially Paul and Gene, have hundreds of millions of dollars. They don't just have like $10 million. And I don't know if I'll live I'm 30 years old. I'm a rock star and I have $10 million. And I don't think that'll be enough to live. No. These guys are in the latter part of their life, and they have hundreds of millions of dollars. So they don't need to do it.
Right. They only do it if they really want to do it. Like, I mean, David Gilmour, just put an album out, but he doesn't have to do shit. He just does it because he wants to do it.
Yeah. He's a musician. He loves it. And
yeah. He doesn't expect like, I'm going to sell 2 million copies of this album.
Right.
Whatever he wants, he's just doing something just because he wants to do it.
But also, when David Gilmour decides to go on tour, he's not going to go to 50 things and then jump around the stage all over the place and stuff.
No. He's going to just stand there and sing and play his guitar.
Right. And so it's a grind on these guys, and when you go to see Kiss on their very last show, you expect to see Gene spitting fire. You expect to see Paul jump off a speaker.
Well, they still got to move all around the stage, That guys to just stand still. So yeah, it's lots of effort being made.
Yeah.
That's why also, once again, I'm going to go with Alice Cooper and say I'm really impressed that he keeps going with his stage show.
Yeah.
Although it's definitely, not to the extent like he had back with the original band, Alice Cooper, but just the sheer energy level of those shows, and he's still out there doing it. But he says he's doing it because I think he said he's 6 years younger than Keith Richards, so he's got to beat him. So unfortunately, now that he's announced that, he's stuck doing it.
He's got to do it. He can't check him out now.
Yeah, precisely. Damn you, Keith.
Can't you die, you cockroach?
Yeah,
Good
really.
Lord.
I know.
So Paul Stanley, I saw in an interview a couple years ago, they asked him about, are they going to make any new albums or anything? And he said, no. We're not going to make any albums because people don't want them. They love the old stuff, and I love those songs too.
And I tell you what, it's exactly almost word for word what Roger Daltrey said about what's the point in them making an album.
Right.
Certain bands are just so locked into an era that, there's just no way. I hate to say it, like when you get the younger fans, the newer fans, they're fans because of the old material. You're not acquiring new fans with the new material.
No.
That doesn't mean every band is like that, but certainly these classic bands who have been around for decades, they really end up, you hate to say it, becoming a greatest hits band.
Right.
But that's because once again, you're towards the end now.
Yeah. And we want to hear Kiss, if you're a Kiss fan, it's like seeing Ozzy or Van Halen or something. You're like, you guys have like 40 songs that your diehard fans, 40 songs that we would be disappointed if you don't play, and you're not going to play 40 songs, right?
Right, exactly.
You're not going to play 40 songs, and those songs had better be the great ones we love. We don't want you to bring in the new stuff. We don't want you to it's like when we went to see, me and Christina and the kids went to see the Red Hot Chili Peppers, and like half of the songs they played were like new stuff. We're like, oh, okay, whatever. But they ended up not playing, believe it or not, Under the Bridge. So it's like everybody left disappointed. Like you played 5 or 6 songs that only like anybody who bought your last album knows, and you didn't play your most important song.
Yeah.
It was surprising. So anyway, that's basically what Paul Stanley was saying, is that nobody. We just make an album, we put it out, people can like it or not, but whenever they come to our concert, they don't want to hear that. They want to hear, I want to rock and roll all night and party every day.
Yeah. It's like you only have a certain amount of time, and if you've been around for a while and you have enough songs that are popular, there's not a lot else in your set list. You're not having to pad your set list after a while.
Right.
It's like for Rush, although they were never like a big radio band, they got to the point where they would have no opening act. They would play for 3 hours or with maybe like one intermission because they have that much material. And certain songs were must, like every tour, you knew you would get those. Other songs, they could like fill other slots in. And it's just enough to know like, okay, how much can you put in that's not our 5 biggest songs? Like what songs are people going to go away like, oh, I can't believe they didn't play it. Fortunately for them, they had so much material, and their fan base was a little more like, we want to hear something a little off the beaten path.
Right.
For a band like them, since they're mostly people into their albums more so than like their singles, but that's atypical. That is not your typical situation. So for Kiss, they're absolutely like, why would you, even with Rush, the last couple albums they put out were pretty good albums. Very little was performed. Like 2 songs off their last album they played live, and that's only because it was their most recently released album. If you go 5 years later and either one of those songs were still being played in sets, that would have been a miracle.
Right.
Because you got so much classic material, and so if it's been out there a long time, it resonates with more people over a greater amount of time. It's just math. So they're like, yeah, so they're not doing albums. Pete might do an album anyway, but Roger is like, I don't see the point.
And yeah, like you said, it makes total sense. But
And considering like how few people can sell albums anymore, you know, you just feel like I'm putting money into something that's just like a vanity project, you know?
Right.
That's the sad part.
Yeah. Yeah, right. On that note, to sum up Kiss, for all you Gen Xers.
Yeah. Well, Gen Xers, you know, if you're millennial or you know, Gen Z or Gen Alpha, good luck trying to ever experience it.
Yeah. Millennials, you know, they had a lot of MTV and Kiss was still there. And, you know, I was at the Virginia Tech game this past weekend, as this happens at every game. They have times, you know, and during commercial breaks and stuff where they play Rock and Roll All Night and Party Every Day. The kids sing it. You know, they certainly know Rock and Roll All Night and Party Every Day, and they'll show the fans up on the screen, and you know, even the college kids and stuff are singing it. So
yep. So yeah, like I say, once you have enough history with certain album songs, whatever that era was, you're hard pressed to ever come up with anything that's going to get the people's attention.
Yeah, it's
a
not
sad thing. But like certain bands that may have had like say 10, 20 or even 30 years of relevancy, it's hard to get people to still be on board with an album. You know, like, oh, you've been doing this for 50 years. Do I even want to bother with this, Bob Dylan? I don't know.
Right.
But then you can be pleasantly surprised. And once again, certain bands have fans that appreciate some of those little quirks. But I'll tell you what, who didn't, when I went to see Steely Dan back in the 90s, when Walter Becker said, now I'm going to play something off my album, my recently released solo album, that's when he saw everybody run in to get beer, go to the bathroom. People were there for the classic Steely Dan. No one wants to hear it, Walter Becker, from your 20 tracks of whack or whatever this album was called. Sorry. I mean, Donald Fagen, people would tolerate more of some of his solo stuff because it just sounds like Steely Dan.
Right. Boo! I wrote this when my son was with a learning disorder was born, and I saw him in my hand. Boo!
Yeah, right.
Play FM.
Yeah, really.
Peg.
Reeling in the years. That's a band that's like hard for me to like. I love them, but it's to me like there's certain tropes in rock music, rock concerts.
Yeah,
it don't seem to go well with a band like that.
No, it's not that's not what it's about.
They're not getting a mosh pit going on Peg, okay?
Oh God! But
their stuff is amazing. And when I saw them, man, I saw so many 40-somethings losing their shit when they got up on their last song, Bodhisattva, which isn't one of their bigger hits, but it does get played on FM radio, like classic rock radio will play it sometimes.
Right.
And man, they lost their shit like I've never seen in a concert. 30 years later, I still think about that.
It's like that was a deep cut for them, so to speak.
Yeah, exactly. It was an album that got FM play, but was not really an AM single kind of thing. So, and you can be a geek, obviously, if you're into Steely Dan. So it's okay to like fret over the little things.
Classic.
So yeah, so they lost their shit over that, man.
Yay! That's see,
but but I don't. Even then, I don't think I heard anyone say, "Oh my God, they're doing it! They're doing it!
This is their crazy train."
Yeah, yeah. Donald Fagen, go crazy for me, motherfuckers!
Let me see your cigarette lighters.
Yeah.
But so.
Anyway, gutter language, folks. I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry about that. I'll beep it out. I'll beep it out.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, to sum up here on this 2 hour and 30-minute conversation, but Kiss is one of the most influential and amazing bands of all time, and they had nobody did it like they did as far as imagery. Nobody did the merch like they did. Gene Simmons once told a story how another musician said, "Hey man, you guys are sellouts," and he said, "Yeah, you're right. We sold out that stadium and we sold out that stadium," and that's what they were about. They were about their music, making money, doing what they wanted.
Yeah, they had a pretty big vision that some did not have as great as a vision, but they all initially knew this could be something that transcends what was happening, and they put together something that was unique.
Yep.
Can't take that from them. And I'll tell you, I'm just going to tell for people who don't know, I'm just going to throw some songs that I think are like top notch. So 100,000 Years, Black Diamond, that's off their first album.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna go with Ace's first vocal song, "Shock Me."
Shock me, make me feel better.
Yeah, that one is awesome.
That "Hotter Than Hell" was a cool song. I mean, keep on going. Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was thinking "She." That's a great one.
Mm-hmm.
"Cold Gin,"
"Love Gun."
Yeah, "Love Gun." Although that's also comical to me, but.
Yeah.
The cheesiness, double entendre of the whole thing. But at least it's not Alice Cooper, "Muscle of Love."
"Lick My Love Pump" by Spinal Tap.
But I swear to God, it did have a song called "Muscle of Love." I hate that it keeps intersecting, but somehow it does.
Well, I mean, they got their, they were very much inspired by Alice Cooper. So it makes sense that he would be brought into this. I mean, so they had, I stole your love. Oh, so
yeah, that's a great one too.
I mean, they have a lot of really, really good songs, and some crazies, Plaster Caster. So
but the other thing I was going to say is you got to hear this stuff live because their albums are very spotty quality wise, sound quality wise.
So if I could only tell you, if you said, "Hey, Van, give me two," if I wanted to know what Kiss was about, give me two albums, I would say Kiss Alive and Kiss Alive 2. That's really what you need.
Yeah, pretty much, because you're going to get the best version. Now, I will say lots of overdubs on those albums. But yes, the argument is you're still hearing the energy. You're getting the energy of it. It doesn't have to be the exact what was picked up on the microphone on all the guitars, because virtually everybody does overdubs. So just throwing that out there.
Yeah, I mean, it's no big deal. It's just a production thing, but you're still hearing them live. You're still hearing their energy. You're still hearing.
In some cases, you got to re-record it because you get sound quality issues anyway, and which is what they found. They had to go in and overdub. But I'm just saying, I throw that out there just because some people maybe, it's a live album with. It's like, yeah, get over it.
Right.
Just addressing the elephant in the room.
Yeah, and that again, that's no problem because. Like you said,
it is a great live album.
If they're wearing all kinds of, their costumes and all this stuff, anything that could rub up against a microphone, and they're like, I stole your love. They got to fix that. So
yeah,
no big deal.
So I would say no more of an issue than anyone else at that time.
Yeah,
and it saved their asses for sure.
Yeah, we're talking about them because of that. Otherwise, they would not. They wouldn't have lasted. That was it. That was their last thing. And all that time, that energy, the passion, all of that they put into their band, that they pushed it every night, that they said, each one of us has a responsibility to give 100% when we're performing out there. That is what saved their asses, because that's what you get from Kiss Alive and Kiss Alive 2. And they have good music. So
and if you can get your hands on a copy or stream Kiss Meets the Phantom, you got to see it. It's just cheesy fun, and I think they've all like lightened up over it over time. But please see it. It's awesome. It's just awesome, and it's just if you like Mystery Science Theater, you're gonna love that. Yes. You'll riff it on your own.
Yeah, I mean it
riffs itself.
It does riff itself. It's clearly a movie company that saw Rock Band and didn't really know anything what to do with them other than to make something and have some of their music in it. It's really, let's just slap together some nonsensical crap. And
you'll notice also when they performed Hotter Than Hell, they didn't call it that. They said Rip and Destroy.
Oh yeah, rip and destroy. Oh, that's because
also that scene's done by the
by their robot. Yeah, because they're not, and that's why the fans, they want him. He creates the robot Kiss band to come out and then do terrible, and then everybody will hate Kiss.
Also, that, and also to incite the crowd.
Yeah, but like you were insinuating, the song Hotter Than Hell, they had the bad guys sing "Rip, Rip, Rip and Destroy" because they didn't want to say hell on TV.
No, you couldn't do that back then.
No, it's wild.
And when you saw when you saw Rock Hudson say, was it "Damn It"?
It was
on Martian Chronicles.
Yeah, it was "Damn You to Hell."
Yeah, that was like, what?
Or it was "Go to Hell." That's what it was.
Yeah,
go to hell. What did he just? He kisses his boyfriend with that mouth. Couldn't have even imagined that.
But, nobody was even knowing he was. Yeah.
No. That's sad. But
yeah. Anyway, but we've taken up enough of your time, dear listeners.
Yes. If you're still with us, we love you. Believe it or not.
Yeah.
But anyway, that has been our take on Kiss for Gen X.
Yes.
We'll let you know at some point.
Any memories or shows you saw or particular merchandise that you may have purchased back in the day, let us know. Pictures, emails, texts.
Yeah, we love it all.
Brick through the window, whatever works.
Yep.
Well, within reason. Whatever works.
Don't throw a brick through my window. I have guns.
Oh yeah.
Not a good idea. But we do love you.
Yeah, we love you.
We'll shoot at you, but we love you.
We love you. Don't make us. You made us do it. Okay.
Yeah, right. I know. I feel almost guilty about it. Yeah. So anyway, folks, we will see you next time in the playground. Until then, he's been Mattyman.
And he's always Vannyboy.
We'll see y'all later.
Peace and love. Later.
It's all about rock and roll. All that is day in every way. It was the 70s, what can we say? There's nothing but rhyme in this part of the song. So let's just stop it right there.